So I think the end of my dealings with the sanctuary church organization came at the end of October as Kristen Quinn was going back to Missouri, and she goes, "Do you guys know that this is a conversation in Citizens Covenant Group? Do you guys know this is the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther taping 95 Theses on the door of the church?" And so she said, if I could, and this is after we had really worked on the Citizens Covenant for a month. Like I said, 30 people had signed it. She said, I would, if I was staying, she was leaving a couple days before Halloween, the 31st of October. She said, if I was staying, I would tape the Citizens Covenant to the door of the church. I said, I could do it. So, I did. And I think that marked the official end of my relationship. If there was any internal moment where I was basically saying, I cannot help you guys with this project called church. The spiritual moment was when I taped this piece of paper to the door of the church. If I talk about Martin Luther for a minute, that act in the Divine Principle marks the beginning of an era called preparation for the Messiah. And the preparation for the Messiah, it suggests, has to do with decentralization, right? Martin Luther's act was a decentralizing act. And I don't want to explain that. But the way to prepare for the Messiah has something to do with a decentralizing spirit. Why? These are my thoughts. The decentralizing spirit runs counter to or takes power away from your modern day Pharisees. Your modern day Pharisees are more concerned about whether or not they retain a high level of respectability among the people. Their livelihood and reputation is dependent upon a system that funnels respect and support of various kinds to them. So when the providence moves on past their industry, they get upset. These are the people seated with the situation, the internal situation, the concern that the archangel had when Adam was coming into his own. So the way to counter this, inevitability, is the spirit of Martin Luther. Martin Luther had the nerve to tell the church that it actually couldn't run everything and was wrong about a lot of things, and it's not the only game in town, and so forth and so on. Martin Luther was into cursing, scatology. Gideon Raunchy told me that. Did you know that Martin Luther was into cussing? He was known for cussing. I said, wow, that's an amazing parallel, huh? So anyway, I taped the Citizens Covenant on the door on October 31st, 2017. And then I took 95 snapshots from 95 different angles, 95 different locations in the front driveway and the front lawn of the church to honor the number 95 in honor of Martin Luther's decentralizing step, which ushered in the era of preparation for the Messiah. Now, another thing about preparation for the Messiah, you're looking for an unchurched spirit. You're not looking for a spirit that is orthodox necessarily. If you're trying to find prepared people, many times these prepared people are not heavily tethered to any orthodoxy. And that's my realization about the era of preparation. Protestantism, the essence of Protestantism is decentralization. The essence of Protestantism is the direct relationship between the believer and Christ without a priest to tell you how to think about the things that Jesus and the disciples said, right? Okay, enough about that. I bet you got the gist. We were at a micro parallel, right, in the microcosm, because you had overgrown church spirit driven by the ambitions of people like Lourdes Schwartz. So that was the very end of October, and the very end of October, Hyunjin and Yuna told me that they were going to tell their son about the matching, and that I should tell my daughter. So on the same day, me and my wife took my daughter out and told her about this matching, and she agreed, and she wanted to go talk to Hyungjin and Yeonuk. So we did. We all, me, her, and my wife went up to talk to Hyungjin, and he told her that women were going to be jealous and all this kind of stuff. So I'm trying to have meetings about a week later with Hyungjin, and he's like, why? He really doesn't want to deal with it. And I'm like, there's this group of people that want to create an alternate state or a second state because I'm thinking about refiling, and I don't want Tim to say that we didn't do it when in the absence of having two states, because the United States requires at least two states, right? So let me see. Anyway, this leads into me having me being called in, not because of the citizens group, but a week after I told my daughter and he told his son, a week after I put the 95 snapshots, the pictures of the Citizens Covenant on the door of the church, a week later, they wanted to talk to me. So I went down there on a Monday to Hyungjin's place and had a 5-hour conversation with them. But before I had this 5-hour conversation with them, because of the saltiness of some of the other families, my kids didn't wind up going to Southeast Asia because somebody said, if Jamal's kids are going, I don't want to go. So the chaperones don't feel like watching my kids. My kids are realizing that these people are being more and more distant with them. And I saw this coming, that the only place Doug and those guys or anybody had to go, since they couldn't put a dent in me, was to subtly start psychologically messing with my kids. And this is the way it goes. If my kids figure out that the reason why their life is becoming harder and harder and harder socially is because of their dad, then the kids would apply some sort of pressure to the dad. So I don't know whether these people do this because they're Asian. As Hyungjin said in the sermons, Asians will encircle you by talking about you to everybody but you, and then everybody creates this social pressure against you. I don't know if they do this because they're Asian or what, but anyway, I saw it coming from a mile away, and me and my wife decided to stop going to church. We were unchurched before, and so this wasn't alien to us. The question was whether or not we were going to continue to serve the community through being youth pastors. So 2 days before this 5-hour meeting, this 5-hour meeting was a Monday, in the afternoon on a Saturday, my wife and I were talking, well, maybe we could just, take everybody to the church, all of our kids, and as soon as our job is done, just leave, and maybe leave the kids at home and just go do our volunteerism at the church, teach these classes, because you didn't have people wanting to step in for Sunday school, teach these classes, and then come home. And I sat back in my chair, and my wife was sitting on the edge of the bed there, and I heard Father. When I thought deeply, I was thinking, so go on a mission and leave our kids. That's option number one. The other one was expose our kids for a shorter period of time, but expose our kids to that social network, which was becoming more toxic if your last name began with a J and followed by O and H and N and SON. But expose our kids in the interest of public mission, right? So either leave our kids or expose our kids to the archangel thinking. So I kid you not, in my ears I hear, just like when Father said, when I decided to support Hyungjin in December 14th, 2014. Back then in December 14th, Father said, are you going to support my son or not? And this is why I decided to let Hyungjin deal with his problems with his mother. I was going to make this gesture to Father to support his son, whether his son is right about his breakdown of his mother or not, is his son's portion of responsibility. I had no reason to not support him in other areas. So I told God back in 2014, yeah, sure. I told Father, yeah, sure. So just in the same way that I had heard Father's voice back then, I can hear Father's voice, and he's screaming. He said, don't do it! I did both of those things! In other words, he had such a mission that left his kids alone. So don't leave your kids alone, because he already paid that price. And because of his mission and because of restoration and all this kind of stuff in public ministry, he let archangels influence his kids. So Father was saying, don't do it. I did both of those things. So the follow along idea, instantly the way I got it is I did both of those things, so you don't have to. It's not restoration anymore. So he accomplished those things. Heaven is not asking me to put my kids at risk in any way. So that's when I told my wife what I just heard, and we both decided, okay, yeah, we just won't go anymore. So at the 5-hour meeting, me and Hyunjin were gonna talk about the Citizens Covenant group, and we were going to. They had something that they wanted to talk to me about. So basically, when I got there, they were putting me, my family, and my daughter on some kind of a probation. And this probation was because, I find out later in the conversation, you understand I'm going to condense a 5-hour conversation. They were putting on a probation because later in the conversation, Yana says, yep, it was that 95 snapshots, that's why. So I giggled. I was like, you're offended by the Citizens Covenant? I said, do you know how many people signed that Citizens Covenant? I said, do you know what kind of people are in the Citizens Covenant group? So they had no idea. And I said, people you respect for their libertarian spirit are in that group. I said, the Quinns are in that group. I said, the Hutchisons are in that group. I said, Gideon Rauchi's in that group. I was like, these are people you respect as having a libertarian spirit. I'm like, why are you offended? Well, the only thing she could be offended by is the nerve of me putting it on the door of the church. I said, I did that because it's the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther. And Martin Luther created a better situation for Father to be received. You know, so I don't see exactly why it should make you mad. But I'd have to take a guess as to why it made her mad. And making her mad is one thing, but what's the logical leap to putting our family on probation? So what they said was, for you to be in our family, you have to be a member of the church. And I was like, why? You know, I've never been a member of the church. You didn't have a problem with it before. In other words, back in, you know, the summer of 2016, when they asked for the match, and told me that Father wanted to have black people in his family, when they told me that, they knew that I was one of those people, me and Robert and a few other people, one of those people always pressing the issue that we're not church members. And so yeah, she was going to read off a list of things that I had done wrong, okay? Because I was wondering why these people were treating me like I had done something wrong. And I said, okay, yeah, and Hyunjin was like saying, yeah, she's got a list of things and she wants to read it. So she had I think it was a spiral notebook. It looked like she had pages and pages of stuff. And she didn't read any of it because one of the opening comments I said is, I said, quote, I'll just tell you now, if any of that stuff is horizontal, or humanistic, I'm not going to give it a lot of weight, okay? And she smacked the book down on her lap, and she said, it's not humanism, right? So then she just decided not to read any of it. Now, I guess she decided not to read any of it because either it was all humanistic, and she had just got this from Richard. Richard was on a humanistic tear against me when he said, you know, can we call your wife a bitch since you call these women bitch and this kind of stuff. Since he was talking about language and, you know, these humanistic complaints, you know, I'm not a nice guy. Here's the fact of the matter. I was in a situation where I was doing spiritual war against people who are spin doctors, okay? The people in the inner circle of Hyunjin are willing to commit to any form of spin to make Hyunjin happy. And they're willing to, you know, weaken even their conscience or bend the principle in order to make Hyunjin happy. And, you know, obviously they're willing to act like, you know, if Hyunjin does it, if Kukjin does it, it's okay. If Kukjin curses, if Father curses, it's okay. But if I do it, it's not. You know, so they're willing to employ double standards, this kind of thing. And I figured that all of those things, if it was more of the same, all the things in that notebook, then all those things are humanistic. And Richard and those guys had an inability to focus on the principle of the matters laid out in the court case. That the public official should not be using her position to defame a citizen, okay? And so she didn't read those things. And so, like I said, to this day, nobody told me what I had done that was so wrong. And I think they dare not, not because I have the power to poke holes through anything like through sheer brain power. Literally, I have the right to be mean to evil, okay? And they don't like it. They are not able to use the principle to divine that they are actually on the side of hypocrisy and falsehood. So I don't know what to tell them. They're probably always going to think that I'm the bad guy. And they either won't examine themselves or have an inability to examine their position. Plus, bake a little faithlessness or a little spiritual immaturity. Like, these people haven't reached, they're not act, they don't even know that the "you are the Lord" problem is an actual problem. They don't know how to deal with it. There are people who get to the top of the growth stage, and when they do, start to realize, just like Adam, not to listen to the archangel in all matters all the time. Okay, and that's part of their proper growing. These people don't even know that. So what they do to fix any problems with the "you are the Lord" problem is to corral people back into the formation stage and the growth stage church. So because they don't know how to deal with the completion stage, they're offended by the completion stage. That's really what's going on. And instead of diagnosing that that's what's going on with them, they want to say that I'm antisocial, leaving my position, and this kind of thing. I think Hyunjin Nim didn't know how to diagnose that that's what they're going through. Because, not to their credit, but just to give them some leniency, the church organization as a whole is not used to this time where we're beyond restoration, and it was as if the fall had never happened. They are not used to guiding people through the completion stage. They're not used to the idea that people don't need them to guide. They need God's word to guide them through the completion stage. They don't need anybody in the archangelic position to guide them. As a matter of fact, Adam had to figure out between him and God why the commandment was there, why the word of God was there. So he had his relationship with God, and he had the word to get him through the completion stage. He could not rely on, he could not stand as co-owner and Lord if the angels told him how to perfect himself. So okay, that is the problem of the completion stage, and these problems with Yunna and me putting the citizens' covenant on the door of the church, and proper preparation for the Messiah being decentralized, and the completion stage being a decentralized reality where you don't accept the intermediary anymore because it nullifies your portion of responsibility to accept the intermediary. All these things are points that they are not prepared to guide humanity through or make suggestions to brothers and sisters as we all collectively are getting through the completion stage. The problem with the church is that we've had disdain for the typical markers of the completion stage. And I understand it's because people like John Walker or what's this guy, James Anderson, and different people who had high realizations went and did, not strange things, but some of these people actually took wives and concubines and this kind of thing from among the sisters in the church. And because I know one brother whose wife went to bed with one of these guys. And I know a guy who lost his first wife because of this type of "you are the Lord" phenomena taken the wrong way. This is something that I studied, and I realized they didn't know anything about it. And so anyway, the church is piloted by immature people. And I'm not saying that they're not mature at all. I'm just saying the top of the growth stage issues, they're winging it. Okay? The completion stage stuff, they're winging it. The reason why they come up with the levels blessing in February of 2018 is because they're winging it. Whoever came up with that levels thing, whether it was Hyunjin or Tim Elder, they were winging it. Okay? And they don't know how to say, "I don't know." Tim Elder doesn't know how to say, "I don't know." And so rather than admit that he doesn't know, can you imagine him saying that he learned from Father a way to guide people who are supposed to be developing a direct connection with God? That's oxymoronic. So he doesn't know, because you're not meant to know how to corral people of the completion stage. Okay, these are people who are trying to... So what did Father do? When Father realized that we are entering the completion stage, he started rightly decentralizing and making it home-based. So yeah, I don't have any regrets, because the reason I put the 95 snapshots on the door of the church is because we have to move forward into this decentralized reality where we realize that God is answering us, working with us, right from our own couple base. Okay, and that's not going to happen if we're constantly leaning on church leaders, even Youngjan's couple, as some sort of crutch who answers the questions, and we constantly defer, defer, defer. And that's the essence of church. Church keeps you in a shaky ground where you constantly defer, defer, defer. And what happened? Ever since the era of the completion stage, the complete Testament era opened, we started losing blessed children and we stopped gaining new members. In other words, we lost spiritual power, we lost spiritual merit and blessing, and it's over this issue. Until we embrace decentralization, until we get together as fourth Adams and cross-fertilize and share best practices and create a decentralized culture, in other words, a federation of families, not a family fed that is actually functioning as a pyramid, in a pyramid structure, like business as usual with the church structure, but a real federation of families. So this is what I stand for, and it runs against the ignorant hope that the church would become so noticed as an entity. Lourdes Schwartz was promising them that the church would grow according to certain growth charts and numbers, and it wasn't happening because of providence, not because of me, but she scapegoated me, and these people believed it. And so what else happened in that 5-hour conversation? Hyungjin basically told me that the reason why he'd given pause to the matching was because of his wife, and because of Kukjin. So I said to him about Kukjin, I said, why would you let somebody else's... this is what I said to him. I said, I've been telling my kids ever since they were little that the greatest act of love I get to perform, like, you know, your life has these snapshots where you get to... It's like an opportunity to perform a dance, the dance of each moment. It's like you get to participate and you get to choose how you're going to show up to each moment. But the greatest act of love, the moment where I get to play the role of the greatest lover, the person who's giving the thing of greatest value, is when me as a blessed parent gives my kid to another family, to make babies with that family for the sake of the lineage of that family, right? And I said, I don't get to give away something from me to another. Me and my wife don't get to do this in any more dramatic or spectacular way other than the blessing. So Father said the blessing has this thing of greatest value, and we don't get to be in God's position and give that thing of greatest value except at the moment where we give our child. So I told him that. I said, I've been telling my kids this since they were small. I said, so I don't know why, when this moment is upon you, why you would let somebody else's politics get in the way of you and that opportunity. And he said, can you give us a moment? So I went to the bathroom, sat out in the hall. 20 minutes later, they called me back in, and they're willing to work with me. And Hyungjin said that my comment to him was a prayer. In other words, that comment got everything back on track, but not before, when, anyway, he said, what about, he was still chewing on it, right? He says, what about if the person that's getting in between that thing is a family member? And I'm like, who? And he mouths to me, he says, in other words, cook junk. And I said, this boy, his son, Hyungjin's son, I said, this boy came from your testicles. It didn't come from Cook Jung's testicles, So there were more things discussed in that 5-hour conversation. His wife, for example, swore that I was gonna. She's like, we can't marry into Utopia Moon group. We can't marry into your Citizens Covenant group or whatever group you're gonna do. We just can't do that. We can't afford to do that kind of thing. So this is her way of making me bail on the whole Citizens Covenant group because she just can't abide it. I said, I'm not trying to do Utopia Moon. I said it's a very limited purpose. So she was poisoned by a story that Doug Williams and those guys had told her about what I was up to, and I couldn't correct her. I mean, she wouldn't even take it from the horse's mouth. She wouldn't even take it from me that we were not planning, to create this type of Utopia Moon splinter group. She said, yeah, well, you talk a lot the same about the central figure. It's not the era of central figure, just like Utopia Moon. I said, yeah, there are a lot of groups who misuse the top of the growth stage issue There are a lot of people who misuse top of growth stage issue to become antichrist. And they mistake themselves as being the center of the providence, and they should just stick to being the best suited for their area. That's what chapter 5 says. But she equates the two. She equates both decentralized types of groups who judge the misdeeds of church leaders. She equates both of those types, the antichrist type and the type that just stays in its lane and sticks to its area, as both equally bad, which is not good. That's a very unwise thing to do. So yeah, that came out in the 5-hour conversation. And another thing that came out in the 5-hour conversation, she said, if you're having problems with Doug and they live right next door, how is it that you're going to be coming here to visit your daughter? And I'm like, I don't care that Doug lives next door. I didn't put Doug next door. Okay? They didn't put Doug next door. I mean, can a man buy a house wherever he wants to? So Doug wants to always buy a house next to you. And by buying a house next to you, you're telling me that Doug Williams gets to decide the destiny of your DNA and your bloodline simply by moving in the house next door to you. So that was a very silly thing. But that is what she said. She was calling out all the reasons why the kids would be under stress and their marriage would be under stress. And, you know, I get that. I really get that. But, dag, wow, if you buy a house next door to a true family member, you too might be able to play go down in history and play the role of matchmaker, of father's seed. So, yeah, that's one thing that she said. So one of her considerations was how Doug is going to feel about it. So, I mean, Young's likes to say you can't make this stuff up, but yeah. What else? So I'm going to start a splinter group, and they can't intermarry with a splinter group like Utopia Moon, and I can't sort that out. She doesn't understand chapter 5. I'm not a member of the church. I'm not all on board with the church. He said you have to be a member of the church to be in our family. I said I was never a member of the church. You didn't have a problem before when you asked me. So he gives me this blank look on his face, you know. So I felt that they were feeding me excuses that their handlers had fed them. That's what I felt, because they really didn't stand very firm in any of these things. It was just like they were, on behalf of somebody else, throwing a bunch of excuses against the wall to see what sticks. I mean, that's a sad thing to see, you know, and my retorts were very matter-of-fact and very quick and natural for me. But there are these people hiding. I tell you, Doug, to this day, every time, except that one time in front of the church, smiles in my face while talking to Gideon about how terrible I am. Every time I say, he puts this boyish smile on. You know, he's got this boyish smile that, you know, Santa Claus can really put on. But in the meantime, he's like looking at me like I'm public enemy number one. And so they have enough power and influence over Hyunjin's couple at that time to where, you know, they're going to use Hyunjin's couple as a further means to reach me because they hadn't been able to reach me. So the only thing that is in the way of them doing that is Hyunjin's autonomy. Whether or not he will submit to being a tool for Doug and those guys to further press whatever campaign they're pressing against me. Did I think that the matter of the matching, after all the men of the inner circle had been weaponized against me by Lourdes' tears and her crying and her assertions that I'm the reason why the church is not growing and all this kind of stuff, after she weaponized them against me, after she weaponized people online against me, after she weaponized a guy who I worked for 10 years, after she weaponized him against me, is she able to weaponize the matching between me and Hyunjin against me? We know that in August, the screenshots came in where she was trying to do exactly that. Nothing is sacred to her. Everything can be used as a weapon against what? Am I really her enemy? Did I really actually, didn't I forgive her like 6 or 7 times? Did not me and my wife spend 4 hours here and there? Didn't I cry in prayer that she would, you know, see the beauty of her own family? Didn't even her son, who doesn't like me personally, agree with me that my assessment of the way she lives her life is correct? But didn't she already, like, weaponize enough against me? Apparently not. Apparently not. And so, to anyone who's listening, even in the future, you got to understand the power of Jezebel. John the Baptist came in the power and spirit of Elijah, and it was a woman that who had in both cases, it was women who had the pledge of weak men around her that caused John the Baptist the most irrational foe that he was facing. It caused Elijah the most irrational. It's like, how do you fight this kind of irrational, bloodthirsty intent? So, anyway, Lord assisted Jezebel, and Sanctuary Church did not know how to deal with that spirit. There's plenty of Christian YouTube videos about how to deal with the spirit of Jezebel. So I talked to one of my Christian friends some months later, and I said, yeah, I had a problem in that church. He said, you still in that church? I said, yeah, I had a problem in that church. I said, yeah, this woman's kind of like a Jezebel. She wants to be like the most beloved and trusted next to the pastor. And he instantly said, because Christians are used to dealing with the Jezebel spirit, he instantly said, oh, that's the pastor's fault. The pastor is the only one that Jezebel respects because she intends to use his high position to piggyback and be seen as second in command. That's her. That is the nature of her lust. So the only person that can break her out of that delusional American Idol, I'm going to make it to Hollywood type hope that they have is the pastor himself. And if the pastor won't tell her, no mas, we don't have an agreement to create the organization that you have in mind. If the pastor won't do that, nobody can stop the fucking Jezebel. Okay, so they all got conscripted into her army. Anyway, you people of the future, if you don't learn a lesson from this, that's on you. But this is my report of things that happened in November, okay, of 2017. Talk to you later.